The soft hum of machines echoed through the dimly lit pediatric ward at St. Mary's Hospital. David Carter walked slowly down the long corridor, cradling his 3-year-old son, Mason, in his arms. At 36, David looked far older than his years. Exhaustion carved deep lines across his face, each one telling a story of sleepless nights and endless worry. Mason, wrapped in his favorite Superman pajamas, rested his head against his father's shoulder. The bright blue fabric looked oddly cheerful against the sterile white walls. "Daddy," Mason whispered, his tiny voice barely rising above the sound of their footsteps. "Will the doctors make me better?" David swallowed hard, adjusting Mason carefully so as not to disturb the IV line taped to his small arm. "Yes, buddy," he said softly. "They'll do everything they can. You're going to be okay." For the past 6 months, David's world had revolved around hospital visits, treatments, and bills that piled higher than he could handle. His little boy was fighting a rare blood disorder, and as a construction worker on unpaid leave, David's savings had vanished long ago. Still, he pushed through each day, because fathers don't quit, not when their child needs them most. That night, Mason's fever had spiked dangerously high. There had been no time to wait until morning. As David carried his son past the hospital's administrative wing, a sudden flash of color caught Mason's attention. "Daddy, look," he said, pointing through a glass door. David turned. Inside a brightly lit conference room, a group of executives sat around a large table. Standing at the head was a woman in a white blouse and navy skirt, confident, composed, and unmistakably in charge. "That's Mommy," Mason said suddenly. David froze. "Mason, that's not your mom," he said gently, his voice tight, but Mason shook his head stubbornly. "It is Mommy. I remember her voice." David's heart clenched. Mason's mother had walked out on them when he was just a baby, chasing her career and leaving no trace behind. He hadn't seen or heard from her in years. Then, as if drawn by Mason's voice, the woman looked up. Their eyes met through the glass, and in that instant, David's world stopped. It was her Sarah. The confident businesswoman. In the room wasn't a stranger at all. She was the same woman who had once held their son in her arms before disappearing from their lives. Moments later, Sarah stepped out into the hallway, her composure faltering. "David," she whispered. "Sarah," he replied, his throat dry. Mason reached out eagerly. "Mommy, I knew it was you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she finally took in the sight of her little boy, older now, but still with the same curious eyes she remembered. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice trembling. "I've missed you so much." David hesitated, then gently passed Mason into her arms. The child immediately nestled against her, as though no time had passed at all. "What happened to him?" she asked, noticing the hospital bracelet on his wrist. "He's been sick," David said quietly. "A blood disorder. We've been in and out of hospitals for months." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God. I couldn't afford everything he needed," David continued, "but I've done my best." Sarah's tears fell freely as she held Mason close. "I can help," she whispered. "Please, let me help." Over the following weeks, Sarah did exactly that. Using her wealth and medical connections, she ensured Mason received the best specialists and treatments available. But it wasn't just about the money. She began to show up reading Mason bedtime stories, learning his medications, and staying through long nights by his hospital bed. Slowly, she began rebuilding what she had once broken. 3 months later, Mason was stronger, smiling again. The fear in David's eyes had been replaced by hope. One afternoon, as the three of them sat reading together, Mason looked up and asked, "Daddy, are we a family again?" David and Sarah exchanged a quiet look. "We're working on it, buddy," David said softly. Mason smiled and nodded. "Good families stay together." Sarah reached for David's hand, her voice barely a whisper. "He's right." 6 months later, Mason's doctors declared him in full remission. Sarah founded a charity to help other parents struggling with medical costs, a promise born from guilt, love, and redemption. As the family walked out of St. Mary's for the last time, Mason's small voice broke the silence. "See, Daddy, I told you that was Mommy. I never forgot her." Sarah knelt and hugged him tightly, tears in her eyes. "And I never forgot you, sweetheart, not for a single day." David smiled faintly, his heart finally at peace. Sometimes, he thought, love doesn't disappear, it just waits for the right moment to find its way back home. Narrators closing for your YouTube channel. This was another heart-touching story from Whispers of Kindness, where every tale reminds us that love, forgiveness, and faith can heal even the deepest wounds. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that speak to the heart.